"Lower your voice," my husband said, not looking at me. "This is not your house anymore." My sister laughed softly behind him, the sound light and careless, as if she were tasting ripe mango. "You're embarrassing yourself," she added. "You should have known better." I stood there with a bowl of egusi soup slipping in my hands, the heat biting my palms, the smell of palm oil rising into my throat, and in that moment, something inside me went very still. For years, people in our part of Ibadan said I was lucky. They said it in the market when they saw my husband's car parked near the pepper sellers. They said it at church when he dropped crisp notes into the offering basket. They said it at family gatherings when he sat with other men, laughing loudly, speaking English too fast for some of them to follow. Lucky woman. Blessed woman. Quiet woman with a good life. I learned early that silence is a language people respect when it makes them comfortable. I spoke it well. I met Cunnel when I was 24, still selling fabrics from my mother's old wooden stall near Dugby. He came to buy lace for his aunt's wedding, or at least that was what he said. He wore polished shoes and asked too many questions. When I told him the price, he smiled like he already owned the cloth, and somehow, by the end of the day, he had my phone number and my promise to call. My sister Ao teased me that night, rolling on our shared mattress, saying men like him only marry women who look like they came from magazines. Ao had always been beautiful in the way people notice first. Lighter skin, sharp nose, laughter that filled rooms. I was the other one. The one people described as good. The one who listened. Cunnel liked that I listened. He said it made him feel like a king. Marriage came quickly. Too quickly, some said. But my mother was tired, and my father had been gone for years, and Cunnel brought yam tubers, bags of rice, cartons of noodles, and envelopes thick enough to silence doubt. At the introduction ceremony, his family praised my humility. They liked that I knelt properly. They liked that I didn't talk back. Ao stood beside me that day, fixing my gelly, whispering jokes, telling me not to forget her when I moved into my new house. She hugged me so tightly I thought she might cry. After the wedding, life became a careful routine. I woke before dawn. I cooked. I cleaned. I ironed his shirts the way he liked, sharp enough to cut skin. Cunnel provided, and he reminded me of it often. When he was pleased, he bought me gold earrings. When he was not, he withdrew into silence that lasted days. I told myself this was marriage. My mother told me patience builds a home. Ao visited often. Too often, some neighbors whispered, but I brushed it aside. She was my sister. Blood. She said my house was peaceful, that she liked sitting on my couch, watching TV, eating my food. Cunnel joked that it was good I had brought my sister to keep me company. I didn't notice when the jokes changed. At first, it was small things. Cunnel correcting my words in front of her. Laughing when she mocked my accent. Telling her she was smarter, sharper. "This one," he would say, pointing at me, "she is too gentle." Ao would smile, her eyes lingering a second too long. The day I found the messages, my hands didn't shake. That surprised me. I was cleaning the bedroom when Cunnel's phone buzzed on the bed. He had left it behind in a hurry, rushing to a meeting. The screen lit up, and Ao's name stared back at me like a challenge. I told myself not to look. Good wives don't pry. But something old and quiet in me reached out anyway. The messages were not poetic. No love stories. Just arrangements. Times. Complaints about me. Jokes about how blind I was. A picture of my sister in my own bathroom, wrapped in my towel. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time after that. The house was silent except for the hum of the generator outside. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I finished cleaning. I cooked dinner. I welcomed my husband home with a smile. That night, I slept deeply. When Ao moved in, temporarily, saying she needed space from a failed relationship, no one questioned it. Cunnel insisted. He said family must help family. I nodded. I set up the guest room. I gave her fresh bedsheets. They stopped hiding. They talked over me as if I were furniture. They shared glances I was not meant to catch. Once, Cunnel told me to make tea for us, while they sat close on the couch. Ao didn't even pretend to be uncomfortable. Still, I said nothing. People mistake silence for ignorance. They confuse patience with stupidity. It is an easy mistake to make. What Cunnel never asked was how a woman like me, who barely spoke above a whisper, always had extra money set aside. He never wondered how I knew exactly which documents he signed without reading. He never noticed that I remembered numbers, names, dates. He assumed my world ended at the kitchen sink. The night everything broke open, rain fell hard on the zinc roof, loud enough to cover raised voices. I had just served dinner when Cunnel pushed his plate away and sighed dramatically. "We need to talk," he said. Ao leaned against the doorway, arms folded, lips curved in a smile that wasn't kind. Cunnel cleared his throat. "This arrangement, it's not working." I waited. He continued, "Ao understands me better. She supports my ideas. She challenges me. You." He looked at me like I was a child who had failed a test. "You are comfortable, but comfort is not enough." Ao stepped forward. "It's not an insult," she said softly. "Some women are just meant to support from the background." That was when I asked, "And where am I meant to go?" Cunnel shrugged. "We'll sort something out. You can stay with your mother for now." That was when he said it. "This is not your house anymore." As I stood there with the soup burning my skin, I realized something important. They believed this moment was the end of my story. They believed humiliation was my final shape. I set the bowl down carefully. I nodded once. "Okay," I said. Ao blinked. Cunnel frowned, as if my calm had cheated him of something. That night, I packed quietly. I left behind clothes, shoes, things that could be replaced. I took only what mattered. Documents. Receipts. A small notebook hidden beneath my underwear, filled with numbers and observations collected over years. My mother welcomed me without questions. She had learned long ago that some truths arrive when they are ready. In her small house, under flickering light, I slept again, deeply. The days that followed were loud with gossip. Some blamed me. Some pitied me. Cunnel married Ao quickly, proudly, as if speed could erase shame. Photos flooded social media. They looked happy. Victorious. I watched everything quietly. What they didn't know was that while I had been serving food and kneeling in respect, I had also been listening. To Cunnel's business calls. To his complaints about cutting corners. To his jokes about how rules only matter for poor people. I had watched him sign papers he didn't understand. I had helped him organize files he never reviewed. I knew where the cracks were. I didn't rush. I waited. I returned to the market, reopened my mother's stall, expanded it slowly. People underestimated me again. That was fine. Months passed. Cunnel's business grew too fast. New contracts. New cars. Ao flaunted her new life, posting quotes about loyalty and betrayal that made people laugh quietly behind her back. Then the invitation came. A business seminar in Lagos. Networking. Public recognition. Cunnel was to be honored as an emerging leader. His name printed boldly on banners. I saw the announcement online and smiled for the first time in a long while. Some stories do not end when people think they do. Some stories are only just finding their voice. And when Cunnel stepped onto that stage, confident, careless, with my sister clapping loudly in the front row, he had no idea that the quiet woman he sent away had already arrived. I sat at the back of the hall in Lagos, close enough to hear every word, far enough to remain invisible, and I watched my former husband smile as if the world owed him applause. The hall was air-conditioned, bright, filled with men in fitted suits and women wearing confidence like perfume. Cunnel stood taller than he ever did at home. Success had straightened his back. He spoke into the microphone about innovation, resilience, African excellence. People nodded. Some clapped before he finished sentences. Ao sat in the front row, legs crossed, phone angled just right, recording him. Her smile was wide, proud, possessive. She leaned toward the woman beside her and whispered something that made them both laugh. I recognized that laugh. It used to belong to my nights. Cunnel thanked his support system. He mentioned mentors, investors, his understanding wife, gesturing toward Ao without saying her name. The audience applauded again. He basked in it. When the moderator invited questions from the audience, I didn't raise my hand. I waited. People like Cunnell expect confrontation to come loudly. They are not prepared for patience. After the event, there was mingling, drinks, laughter, business cards changing hands. I moved slowly through the crowd, exchanging polite smiles, listening more than I spoke. Some people recognized me, though they couldn't place where. I wore a simple dress, nothing that demanded attention. Quiet still works, even in rooms full of noise. I approached one of Cunnell's partners first. A man with soft hands and sharp eyes. We spoke briefly about supply chains, about trust, about how often small oversights destroy big dreams. He nodded, interested. I gave him my card. He glanced at the name, frowned slightly, then smiled again. I let that moment sit. Cunnell noticed me later. I saw it in the way his voice stumbled mid-laugh, the way his eyes narrowed as if reality had glitched. He excused himself from a group and walked toward me, disbelief sliding into irritation. "What are you doing here?" he asked quietly. I smiled politely. "Networking." Ao appeared at his side, her expression shifting from shock to disdain. "You were invited." "I was," I said. Cunnell forced a laugh. "This is not the place for old matters." "I agree," I replied. "This place is about the future." Something about my tone unsettled him. He glanced around, suddenly aware of eyes, of proximity. "We'll talk later," he said. I nodded. "Of course." I left shortly after, before curiosity could turn into questions. Power does not rush to explain itself. 2 weeks later, the first crack showed. One of Cunnell's major suppliers pulled out, citing irregularities. Cunnell ranted at home, pacing, blaming incompetence. Ao tried to soothe him, telling him it was temporary, that powerful people always face obstacles. He believed her because he needed to. Then a bank froze one of his accounts. Just one. Enough to inconvenience, not enough to alarm. Yeah. Cunnell called everyone he knew. He cursed. He threatened. He blamed enemies. He never once thought of me. At night, when he slept restlessly beside my sister, I imagined his dreams beginning to tilt, the ground beneath him no longer firm. I imagined confusion seeping in where certainty once lived. I did nothing visible. That was the hardest part for people like Cunnell to understand. I didn't call. I didn't confront. I didn't hint. Silence, again, did its work. Ao started visiting my mother's house unannounced. She stood in the doorway with rehearsed sympathy, asking after me as if concern were a costume she could slip into. "You should let things go," she told me once, sitting stiffly on a plastic chair. "Holding bitterness only hurts you." I poured her water and said nothing. She leaned closer. "Cunnell is under pressure. If you know anything that could help him—" I met her eyes then. Calm. Unmoved. "I know many things," I said. "Help is a choice." Her face hardened. "You think you're smarter than us now?" I smiled faintly. "No. I think you never noticed." She left without finishing her water. The whispers started in business circles. Quiet, dangerous whispers. People asking questions. Files being reviewed more carefully. Deals delayed. Cunnell's name no longer spoken with easy admiration. At another public event, smaller this time, Cunnell spoke again, but his voice lacked its old rhythm. Ao watched from the side, her confidence thinning. I was there too. This time, when questions came, a young woman stood up. She spoke clearly, politely, asking about transparency, about certain inconsistencies in reported figures. The room shifted. Cunnell answered, but sweat gathered at his temples. Afterward, people talked. Phones buzzed. Curiosity grew teeth. Cunnell came home that night angry, snapping at Ao, accusing her of distracting him, of not understanding the pressure he was under. She snapped back, reminding him of everything she had sacrificed. Their unity, built on betrayal, began to crack under weight. I watched from a distance as their love turned sharp, then brittle. They blamed each other for things neither wanted to face. Arrogance, when cornered, eats its own. The final invitation came months later. A formal inquiry. Public. Unavoidable. Connell stood before a panel, this time without applause. Documents laid out neatly. Questions precise. Evidence undeniable. He tried to talk his way through it, charm his way out, but charm fails when silence has already spoken. Ao sat behind him, pale, clutching her bag as if it might float her away. When the chairperson asked if anyone present wished to add relevant information, the room went quiet. I stood. The murmur that followed was small but electric. Connell turned slowly. Recognition spread across his face like cold water. "You," he whispered. I walked forward, each step measured. "Yes." I spoke calmly. Not long. Not loud. I clarified timelines. Authenticated documents. Explained patterns I had observed while serving meals, while organizing files, while listening to the man who thought I was invisible. No insults. No accusations. Just truth, arranged neatly. When I finished, I stepped back. The panel thanked me. Connell said nothing. Ao covered her mouth, eyes darting, as if the room might collapse around her. In that moment, no one shouted. No one clapped. The damage was complete without noise. As I left the room, sunlight warming my face, I felt something loosen inside me. Not joy. Something quieter. Something like release. Behind me, Connell's voice rose for the first time, desperate, unraveling. My sister's sobs followed, sharp and uncontrolled. I did not turn around. Some lessons are not for the ears. Some endings do not need witnesses. And as I stepped into the open air, free of the weight I had carried for so long, I wondered how many people mistake silence for weakness, never realizing it is often where the sharpest truths are kept. Connell's name did not disappear overnight. It faded slowly, the way respect leaves a room when people stop defending you. After the inquiry, no official statement came immediately. That waiting period was the cruelest part. Sponsors paused. Partners hesitated. Friends stopped calling as often. Connell sat at home more, scrolling through his phone, refreshing pages that no longer mentioned him. Ao tried to keep the house alive with noise, music, visitors, laughter that sounded forced, but the walls had learned too much silence. I heard about everything without asking. News travels fast in our kind of society, especially when a fall is involved. At the market, women spoke in low voices, shaking their heads. At church, people prayed harder when his name came up, careful not to sound like they were choosing sides. One afternoon, Connell showed up at my mother's house. I wasn't surprised. Desperation retraces old paths. He stood outside for a long time before knocking. When I opened the door, he straightened instinctively, as if preparing to give orders, then remembered himself. "You look well," he said. "So do you," I replied, though it wasn't true. He followed me inside, eyes scanning the small living room, the same one he had dismissed years ago as temporary. He sat where I pointed, hands clasped, posture stiff. "I didn't know where else to go," he began. "Things have been complicated." I poured him water. The same way I had poured it for my sister. The same calm movements. "They are asking questions," he continued. "People are misinterpreting things. You know how business is." I nodded. He swallowed. "What you said at that panel, it surprised me. I didn't say anything untrue." He leaned forward. "You could help clear this up. Explain context. You know I never meant to." I looked at him then, really looked. At the man who had spoken over me, replaced me, erased me without hesitation. His eyes searched my face, trying to find the obedient woman he remembered. "I already explained everything I knew," I said. "To the right people." His jaw tightened. "Why are you doing this?" The question was almost funny. Almost. "I'm not doing anything," I replied. "I'm done." He stood abruptly, frustration breaking through. "You think this makes you powerful?" "No," I said gently. "I think power doesn't need permission." He left without another word, the door closing softly behind him. Ao came next, days later. She didn't knock. She walked in like she still belonged. She looked thinner. Her confidence, once effortless, now hung on her like borrowed clothes. "You ruined everything," she said, standing in the middle of the room. I gestured for her to sit. She didn't. He trusted you, she continued. He told you things because you were his wife. I was, I agreed. And you used that. I tilted my head. He used me first. Her lips trembled. You always thought you were better than me. I smiled sadly. No. I thought you were my sister. That broke something in her. She sank into the chair, covering her face. I didn't think it would go this far. Neither did I said. She looked up, eyes red. Is there anything you can do? Anything at all? I paused, letting the question breathe. There is, I said finally. But it won't save what you think it will. She waited. You can tell the truth, I continued. To yourself. To him. About why you did what you did. That's the only help left. She left shortly after, quieter than she arrived. The inquiry concluded weeks later. Cunnell was barred from certain contracts. His reputation, once polished, now carried an asterisk. People still smiled at him in public, but their eyes measured distance. Their marriage didn't survive it. A.O. moved out first, returning to our mother's house briefly before leaving town altogether. Cunnell stayed alone in the large house that once symbolized success, now echoing with reminders. I did not celebrate any of it. Instead, I focused on my own life. The fabric business grew steadily. I hired women who reminded me of myself, quiet, observant, underestimated. I paid them fairly. I listened when they spoke. Sometimes, late at night, I thought about how close I had come to disappearing entirely. How easily I could have accepted the version of myself others wrote. But stories change when the teller does. Months passed. Then years. One evening, as I closed the shop, I noticed a young girl watching me. She hesitated before approaching. "Auntie," she said, "my mother says you are very strong." I smiled. "Why does she say that?" The girl shrugged. "She says you didn't shout, but you won." I locked the door and walked home under a sky heavy with stars. Strength, I realized, is often mistaken for noise because silence makes people uncomfortable. Somewhere in the city, Cunnell was still explaining himself. Somewhere else, A.O. was rebuilding in pieces. Their stories would continue, shaped by their choices. Mine had already turned. And as I lay down that night, peaceful in a way I hadn't been for years, I wondered how many women were taught to be quiet without being taught what quiet could become. The night air was warm, thick with the smell of dust and fried akara drifting from a nearby street corner, and as I lay awake listening to distant generators hum, I realized I was no longer waiting for anything to happen to me. That was new. For a long time, my life had been shaped by reaction. Respond to Cunnell's moods. Adjust to family expectations. Absorb my sister's shadows. Even my revenge had been patient, careful, designed around other people's movements. Now, for the first time, there was no next move to calculate. Freedom feels strange when you meet it quietly. Weeks later, my mother fell ill. Not dangerously at first. Just small complaints. Weakness. Loss of appetite. But in our world, small things are never ignored. I took her to the clinic, sat beside her plastic bed, fanning her gently while nurses moved in and out. She watched me with tired eyes and smiled. "You have changed," she said. I shook my head. "I am the same." "No," she replied softly. "You are standing where you used to kneel." She recovered slowly. During that time, relatives visited. Some out of concern. Some out of curiosity. People wanted to see the woman who had survived a public disgrace and come out untouched. They asked indirect questions, praised my composure, hinted that I had always been too quiet to understand. I let them talk. One afternoon, a woman from church pulled me aside. "You should remarry," she said, lowering her voice. "A woman should not stay alone for too long." I smiled politely. "I am not alone." She frowned, confused, then laughed it off. What people mean when they say alone is unclaimed. The market continued to grow around me. New stalls. New faces. Traders began asking for my advice. Younger women came to me with their problems. Husbands who underestimated them, brothers who dismissed them, employers who paid late and spoke loudly. I never told them what to do. I just listened. Sometimes, that is enough for people to hear themselves clearly. One evening, as I was counting the day's earnings, I saw a familiar figure standing across the road. Kunnel. He looked smaller. Not physically, but in the way men shrink when they no longer believe the world is impressed by them. He hesitated before crossing, as if unsure he was welcome in my line of sight. I did not wave him away. He approached slowly. I heard your business is doing well. Alhamdulillah, I said. He nodded, hands in pockets. I wanted to say, I see now. Things I didn't see before. I waited. You were never weak, he continued. I was just loud. That was the closest thing to an apology he could manage. I didn't need you to see, I replied. I needed you to stop stepping on me. He swallowed. I'm leaving the city. I nodded again. I hope you find peace. He looked at me as if searching for bitterness, for triumph, for punishment. Finding none unsettled him more than anger ever could. As he walked away, I felt no victory, only distance. Later that night, my sister called. Her voice sounded older, tired. She spoke from another city, one I had never visited. She told me she was working again, slowly rebuilding, learning how to be alone. I don't expect forgiveness, she said. I just wanted you to know. I think about what I did every day. I know, I replied. There was silence between us, heavy but not hostile. Do you ever miss me? She asked quietly. I closed my eyes. I miss who we were before we knew ourselves. She exhaled shakily. That's fair. When the call ended, I sat for a long time, listening to the night. Pain does not disappear. It changes shape. It becomes memory instead of wound. Years passed gently after that. My business expanded beyond the market. I partnered with women in other towns, creating supply lines that favored those who had always been last in line. I employed widows, divorced women, girls whose families said education was wasted on them. I didn't advertise empowerment. I practiced it. Occasionally, someone recognized me from old gossip. They asked how I survived such betrayal without losing myself. I never gave a straight answer. Because the truth is, I did lose myself. I just found something better where she used to stand. On a quiet evening, much like this one, I stood outside my shop watching the sunset bleed into the sky. A young bride passed by, head bowed, carrying groceries, her steps careful. Her husband walked ahead, not noticing when she slowed. I wondered what she would become. I wondered how many women were taught that endurance was the same as virtue, that silence was the same as peace. I wondered how many stories were still unfolding quietly, unnoticed, gathering strength in the shadows. The world will always underestimate calm women. It will always reward noise first. But noise fades. What remains is what was built patiently, deliberately, without asking permission. I locked my shop and turned toward home, my footsteps steady, my hands empty and light. Somewhere behind me were the ruins of a life that tried to erase me. Somewhere ahead was nothing I needed to prove. And if you are listening to this story, perhaps you are wondering what you would have done differently. Perhaps you are asking yourself how much power lives in the things you never say. Because sometimes, the most dangerous secret is not revenge. It is knowing exactly who you are and refusing to disappear.